So let's talk about North Carolina and Kentucky. It was not a good day to be a North Carolina fan. The final score of that game was 98-69. Kentucky, fresh off of a loss to Notre Dame, in which they put up 62 points, almost went for triple digits against a North Carolina squad that some of us thought, including myself, thought was back and thought had figured some things out. The biggest issue, I think, is the defensive end for North Carolina, and it just felt like we talked about this on Saturday night with Randolph Childress and Jeff Goodman, that there was just no toughness on that North Carolina roster. And so, Steve, I want to go to you on this first, because if you have a team, I feel like so much of what happens defensively is about having pride and actually winning your one-on-one matchup. And you have a roster full of guys that don't take that pride in going out and getting the stops that you need to be able to get, to get stops. What do you do? How do you fix that?
Well, I think the elite defensive teams, we talked about this off air, I think they have multiple guys that can keep the ball in front and contain the dribble, and that they're versatile enough to switch, whether it's ball screens, dribble handoffs, pin downs. That's why you see those teams like Baylor, who's really made themselves elite defensive the last 3 years. They can really guard the ball and stay in front of people. But you can recruit to it, but I think from day one you've got to build it into your program, build in your base, and make sure your team knows that that's what you're going to be accountable for, and that's what's important to you.
Ashton, you've been a player at a high level. How much of what happens on the defensive end of the floor is about just wanting to get stops, wanting to guard? I think a lot of it is about scheme. A lot of it is about athleticism, but so much of being a good defender to me is effort and actually caring about the pride and getting that stop.
Oh, for sure. That's the basis of it, is your attitude, your toughness, and just your effort, possession by possession, defensively. I thought Kentucky, played really well. They simply out-toughed UNC. I'm a big Oscar Tshiebwe fan. I know you have a West Virginia shirt on right now, but he's doing well for Kentucky. I think he just gives them a different type of toughness. Obviously around the basket, rebounding the ball, but just being a vocal leader in that, secondary and that backline defense. I think he's a really good piece. And then perimeter defense, like we said, guarding the ball, keeping guys in front, securing rebounds, contesting shots. Very underrated. That's what Kentucky did.
Yeah, I think the glaring stat for me, Steve, North Carolina is 97th on KenPom right now in adjusted defensive efficiency, but they rank 350th in defensive turnover rate, which basically means there are only 7 teams in college basketball that force turnovers on a fewer number of possessions than they do. That to me says it all about what this team is defensively.
Yeah, passive. I mean, that preaches passivity. And you look at, their 2 big numbers from the Kentucky game: 53% defensive field goal percentage from the 3, 54 from the field, and then minus 18 on the glass. You're not beating any team in the top 25 or any team when you're getting out rebounded minus 18, unless you're just elite from the 3-point line and you do not turn the ball over at all.
Yeah, that's the thing about it to me, right? It's not just the effort defensively. It's not just, there were plays that people saw where Dawson Garcia is not diving on the floor, and Severe Wheeler, after we saw him get completely shut out against Notre Dame, got whatever he wanted. He looked like Chris Paul out there. Finished with 26, 8 dimes, 4 steals. It was not having the pride and getting that one stop. But the thing that really stood out, Ashton, getting out rebounded by 18. I don't think a Roy Williams team ever got out rebounded by 18. I don't think a Roy Williams team ever gave up 17 offensive rebounds in a single game. That's where he hung his hat. That's where he prided himself in, was going out and getting all the rebounds. I asked him about that once, and what he basically said was, well, if you get all the rebounds, you get more possessions. And I was like, okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I see where you're coming from with that.
Yeah, and that's just toughness. That's just attitude, your approach to every possession going into the game. And like you said, Roy Williams, a typical Roy Williams team, at least, they would never get beat up on the boards like that. But I think your approach to the game changes. Defensively, you can literally make your mark in the first few minutes just by getting a couple rebounds and just being a little bit more physical than the other team, especially when you're playing on the road. I think Kentucky did a good job of, just they had the crowd was rocking. It was definitely bleeding blue for sure, and they took advantage of them.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, Steve, with this Kentucky team and kind of what they've been so far this season and where they are now, like where is their outlook? Where do you see them kind of sitting in the hierarchy of SEC teams at this point?
Well, the one number that sticks out to me from that game, though, too, for Kentucky, and it shows that they're growing and they're knowing how to play together. 20 assists, and if you got 20 assists, man, you're playing really good basketball. You're sharing, and obviously Carolina, you got them in rotation all night. But I would think in the top three, I mean, you look at Alabama, you look at Auburn, LSU, Tennessee. I mean, those four teams right off the bat in the SEC, to me, I think they're possible second weekend teams in the NCAA tournament. Obviously, I think Kentucky will be in that fold. So in a 14-team league, I think they're in that top, 4 or 5. Arkansas, you got to kind of see how they go. I know Oklahoma beat them a week ago, but probably in that top 4 or 5. But LSU's undefeated. I'm a very, very big fan of Tennessee. Love Alabama. They went over Gonzaga. And then Auburn, Bruce Pearl's teams. You talk about just intensity and playing the right way and competing. So it'll be a fun race in the SEC.
Yeah, my concern with them is they've kind of built their team around Oscar Tshiebwe and around having that big fella on the block, but they got a point guard that can't really shoot it. They got a 4-man that can't really shoot it. They don't have CJ Frederick on the floor right now. I can't really figure out how Damian Collins or Bryce Hopkins or even Jacob Toppin kind of gets in it's just, it feels like they tried to build a roster for modern basketball 4 around 1 with a bunch of versatile guys. And it's not really working at this point to me. Does that make sense, Ashton?
No, that makes sense. I think they're still trying to find their roles. I think it's happening all over college basketball right now. Still early, I think, with the transfer rule, with obviously freshmen, and then now you talk about COVID outbreaks. I think rhythms, it's going to be a game of rhythm now. Can guys stay in shape? Can guys stay fluid with, coming off of a couple games, whether they're canceled or whatever the case may be? I think just finding your role, especially with transfers, but at the same time, coming off these COVID outbreaks and these cancellations of games, postponements, can guys stay in rhythm is going to be huge.
Yeah, I will give them credit on that, is that they got on a plane expecting to play Ohio State, and they got to Vegas and they were playing North Carolina. And I mean, Steve, you can attest to this, the amount of prep that goes into when you're going up for a matchup like that, the amount of prep that goes into that kind of a game, the way that they were able to adjust on the fly makes a lot of sense. Now, I'm going to assume that most players are probably not sitting there like grinding hours and hours and hours of film beforehand. They're going to watch the clips that coaches kind of cut up for them. But it's still, you're going in expecting one thing, taking on something else, and you come out with a 30-point win. Like that's not the easiest thing in the world to do.
No, and that shows a lot about obviously what Calipari does from that standpoint of preparing his guys, but also the focus of his kids to go from Lexington out to Vegas, like you said, change opponents. I was on in the car the other day. I'm listening to Calipari talk about Chris Holtman and him were getting together talking about what they were going to do for the state of Kentucky with the tornadoes and how they were going to really help this game to bring more awareness and raise more funds. And then the next day you find out they're not playing Ohio State. And so obviously prep work is huge. But they've got guys like Severe Wheeler that's been through it, Oscar Tshiebwe that's been through it. And, they were ready to go. And, it may have been different if they didn't throw North Carolina in front of them, but they did, and they took care of business, and they needed that win, especially after the Notre Dame game.